privacy for me, it's not about hiding. It's about empowering individuals and giving them back the choice to disclose which information they actually want to reveal to the world. And what we're seeing is an attack on this individual choice across the board. We're seeing governments say, no, we're going to mandate what information you have to hand over. We're seeing attacks from corporations where they're relinquishing, they're stripping us of our control as well, where they are misrepresenting what happens to our data. So really the privacy movement is just about giving individuals back control to make decisions for themselves.
This is Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.
Hi, and welcome to Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio, the show that brings you defenders of liberty from across the globe. Today, we're having a conversation about personal privacy in the digital age, and there may be no one more suited for that conversation than our guest today, Naomi Brockwell. Naomi is joining us from the Radical Innovation Summit in Mexico City, where Atlas Network is one of the co-hosts, and spending quite a bit of time talking with students and business leaders and peers throughout the Freedom Network and the worldwide freedom movement about this topic of personal privacy in the digital age. Naomi, thank you so much for your time, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Let's start with just a general question, because there's so much that you do and you have so much influence on this topic. But when someone asks you, like, Naomi, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
What do I do? I rant a lot about privacy. I run the Ludlow Institute. So it's a research and media institute. We focus on advancing freedom through technology. And we look at anything that can use the amazing innovative capabilities of technology to advance freedom of individuals. So we look at a lot of decentralized tech, a lot of censorship-resistant technology. Privacy technology is a big thing for us because we think it's the foundation of all other freedoms. You can't actually use the decentralized tech and all of these other things if you don't know how to, use the internet privately. And if someone, if a government, for example, doesn't want you to use it, they can target you as an individual. So we really focus on putting practical tools in individuals' hands. There are lots of notable ways that people are fighting for freedom all over the world. I mean, Atlas Network is doing an incredible job. But what I love about Atlas Network is it's so focused on practical tools. You're actually dealing day to day with people who are living in hostile regimes who are trying to advance the cause of liberty. And those people need practical tools in their tool belt. And so that's what we really try to provide to help organizations like Atlas Network and other organizations here to advance their own freedom in their own countries as well.
I love this conversation about practical tools because, just starting right off the bat, what's the number one thing that people don't realize or they don't know right now about the risk to privacy or the danger of being online?
Right. Oh, gosh, the number one thing is they don't realize that privacy is something they should be fighting for. We've kind of taken it for granted for a long, long time. It's been built into the mechanism of society. We all have homes and we draw our curtains and we don't really question it. And then we got to the internet. There's a lot of good faith that goes into giving information away. A lot of people just never realize that what's happening with that information behind the scenes, who's collecting that information, how it's being shared, how it's potentially being harnessed against people. And so letting people understand that is a big step. You mentioned to me earlier at this conference, I'll relay an anecdote. There's this great quote by the former president of Cisco, and he said there are two types of companies in the world, those that have been hacked and those that don't yet know they've been hacked. And you remarked that kind of was one of those quotes that hits you because that's another thing people don't think about. They don't think about the fact that all the information they hand over to governments, to their friends, to corporations, no one can keep this information safe. It will get hacked. And so privacy, for me, it's not about hiding. It's about empowering individuals and giving them back the choice to disclose which information they actually want to reveal to the world, to be selective about what they want to reveal. And I think that's part of the privacy battle, is reminding individuals not only that they're empowered to make these decisions and that they can actively choose what they want to release to the world, understanding the risk that this data might be put in, but also that they have responsibility. There is an individual responsibility element to this of personal control. It turns out that it's very hard to protect data. That's just a fact of reality. I wish it weren't so. I wish we could all take a magic pill and everything's safe and we could trust all the companies and governments and everyone would just look after this. But it's very difficult to secure systems. So reminding people that everything that they hand over is going to be stored somewhere and is not going to be able to be kept 100% secure is an important lesson, because then they are reminded of that individual responsibility, which honestly is a great thing. I love individual responsibility, knowing that the only thing standing between me and my internet freedom is my own willingness to like put in the effort or make decisions or make certain choices. That's a great thing. So it's about just individual responsibility and empowering the individual so that they know what tools are available to them.
Do you think part of it is kind of framing someone's thought process? Because you have this famous quote that says, privacy is not about having something to hide, right? But getting people to understand privacy is about having something to protect. That's how you framed it. So is that what you find most conversation is? You're trying to get people to understand we're not talking about hiding things, we're talking about protection here.
I think that privacy is going to be different for every individual. Some people it may be about protection. You may be someone who has a violent ex-lover. Yeah, it is very important that you lock down your apps and that you make sure your home internet is not an every data brokerage site and that your cell number is not something someone can use to find your real-time location. You may be someone who really just likes corporations because you think they're greedy or something like that. And so you just out of spite, you don't want them to have your data. You may be someone who's deeply skeptical of centralized control and governments, and you think that it's dangerous for them to have your data. You may be a mother who's looking after your child, and you're just wondering, how can I best protect this
Sure.
person I've brought into the world? So people have all kinds of different reasons to want privacy. And we've been tricked kind of into thinking that it's about hiding. It's like, well, I don't want to hide, therefore privacy is not for me. It's like, well, no, privacy is about control. It's about bringing back the control to ourselves of which information do I want to disclose and which information do I not. And what we're seeing is an attack on this individual choice across the board. We're seeing governments say, no, we're going to mandate what information you have to hand over. We're going to create KYC databases that will get leaked, and all your personal information will make you more vulnerable when it's leaked out on the dark web, and there's nothing you can do about it. We're seeing attacks from corporations where they're relinquishing, they're stripping us of our control as well, where they are misrepresenting what happens to our data, where they're not properly disclosing what they're actually doing with our data. We can't be informed individuals and make actual choices that we believe in if we don't know what's going on. And everything is so cloaked in secrecy when it comes to data collection. So really the privacy movement is just about giving individuals back control to make decisions for themselves. If you want to give data to that company, that's great. I'm wearing a Whoop strap right now. I'm technically doing a research piece on wearables and figuring out the privacy implications and the spectrum of privacy, which ones are better than others. But I'm opting to give this company my data. That's a valid choice. People can make all of these choices. All I'm concerned about is that they're informed. I really want people to make informed decisions because I think they make better decisions.
We're talking with Naomi Brockwell from the Ludlow Institute about privacy, personal privacy in the digital age. But I also want to shift the conversation now, if we could, a little bit to the topic of Bitcoin. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's here at the Radical Innovation Summit as well. And so how has Bitcoin in particular shifted this conversation or maybe highlighted the discussion about privacy and sovereignty?
Yeah, so Bitcoin is kind of what turned me into the privacy field, because I had a weird trajectory, but started out in economics. I was very interested in competing currencies and monetary policy, discovered Bitcoin, was like, oh wow, this is a tool that's potentially uncensorable. There's no central area of control. This is very interesting. This potentially might not be able to be shut down and could be a tool for freedom for people. I was really interested in the idea of decentralized technology, giving people back freedom. And we're living in an age where there's so much incredible technology that are out there, like 3D printers and Bitcoin, blockchain technology, people having local AI on their home computers, not having to use the internet. We've got mesh networks. We've got all kinds of things brewing. But then I realized, wow, even if you have an uncensorable protocol like Bitcoin, if a government gets hostile to it and doesn't want you to use it, you've lost access to this incredible tool. It doesn't matter if the protocol itself is uncensorable. An individual is censorable. And so I realized how important privacy was as being a mechanism for accessing every other tool for freedom. We cannot have freedom in a society. We can't have the freedom to make these choices and access these things if a government And if a government doesn't want us to use them, then they can target us. So I really started honing in on the privacy argument and just making sure that people understood how to use the internet privately so that they could try to garner as much freedom as possible in their lives.
So this is part of the discussion, some of which is happening here, about centralized digital currencies, right? And the threat that could come from them, especially in terms of surveillance. So help our audience understand the depth of the discussion that's happening here around that topic.
Yeah, CBDCs are a really scary tool. If we think about how the financial landscape has been co-opted as a surveillance tool already, really it started with the Bank Secrecy Act in 1970. And even then, right, it was just a $10,000 reporting requirement. It wasn't even like, we're going to capture everything you do. It was just like, well, if you're spending $10,000 in cash, the government can collect that information. Now, in America, we have the Fourth Amendment. It says that if the government wants to collect your information, they need a warrant. So this went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ultimately said, well, it's not it's a huge amount of money. This is a life-changing amount of money. So we don't think that this is super invasive into your lives. So we're going to permit this. But one of the judges even remarked at the time, if this grew in scope, this would be unconstitutional. But as it is, $10,000. Now, $10,000 in 1970 could buy you a house. Right. So yeah, if you're spending cash on a brand new house, I can imagine that being some sort of threshold for suspicious activity and reasonableness of privacy. Anyway, from there, the Bank Secrecy Act regime has just exploded. So you have the Annunzio Wiley Anti-Money Laundering Act of 1992, which basically said, we're going to have SARS, so suspicious activity reports, and they're not going to be capped at like $10,000. Now it's going to be up to the banks to decide anything that they deem suspicious. And if you actually look at the reports that are filed on people, it's really just amounts to people using their own money. Like maybe it got close to $10,000. Maybe it was substantially less than $10,000, but you didn't like the look on their face. Basically, the liability moved to banks they were deputized as these investigatory agencies. And if they didn't file a report, they would be in trouble. So the default is to give more information. Government keeps collecting this. And meanwhile, inflation was never written into the Bank Secrecy Act. So the whole time, the value of the US dollar goes down and down and down. $10,000 no longer has the purchasing power that it did in 1970. And then it exploded again with the Patriot Act. We had the formalization of KYC. So basically all of these things have already hijacked the financial system. And it's really scary because money is the mechanism that we use to interact with the world around us. It's how we show which causes we support. It's how we survive. It's how we interact with people in exchanges and cooperate. And to have all of that in a system that is completely surveilled and controlled right now is really scary. So already you had banks doing far more reporting about our activities than they should be allowed to constitutionally. Then CBDCs take this a step even further. So CBDCs now say that the government is going to be the central point through which every transaction is going to run. We will basically create and run programmable money. And so not only will they have just drastically widened the surveillance apparatus, they would have eliminated any friction of having to get that information from banks. They're the repository now. They don't have to ask for the information from anyone. And on top of that, the programmable aspect of this money is also scary. So you've had politicians talk about how this is going to be a great tool for control. We can now dictate what people are and are not allowed to spend their money on. We can freeze money in accounts if someone has a fine and they don't pay it in time. So let's freeze their account. Maybe we give a stimulus package and someone doesn't spend their money quickly enough. We can make that money disappear after a certain time frame. We can just eliminate it. And giving the government control over all of that, that's a really, really scary thing. And I think that it would be way scarier if we didn't have things like Bitcoin, if we didn't have this burgeoning, amazing crypto scene. Because in a timeline where we only had a central bank digital currency and they were the conduit through which everything had to pass, society's lost its freedom at that stage. But we're really lucky because we have this alternative financial system now. And just being able to opt out is so tremendously powerful. You're seeing people all over the globe start to realize this and just use this as a tool for empowerment in their lives. So super, super exciting that we have that option now. It's not as dark as people think. Like government's going to government. The government's always going to government. And so, yes, they will want to, enlarge their control and they like their choke points and all that. As long as we maintain these tools for freedom, especially decentralized technologies, people still have options. And I think that's an important thing.
So I can hear someone right now saying, I'm not doing anything wrong. So I'm not really worried about whether or not the government has access to my information. They probably already do anyway. So this is much to do about nothing.
I hear that a lot too. Yeah, I hear it a lot. I think it's incredibly naive. I think that, first of all, you have no idea who's going to get access to your data in the future. It could be, a hacker who wants to extort you for money. I've had friends who've been kidnapped before. There have been this wave of wrench attacks, as they call them, where people who post that they have cryptocurrency suddenly become a target for gangs around the world. And so already there's that just personal protection element of it. Also, governments come and go, regimes come and go, social norms change. So you've created a permanent record of all of your likes and predispositions, and you have no idea how society is going to change in 10 years' time, who's going to get access to that information, and whether that puts you in a bad light or not. And also, I know plenty of people who are innocent people who haven't done anything wrong. I mean, Ola Binney is a great example. There's a great podcast episode that just came out, Darknet Diaries, talking about Ola, who was a privacy advocate. He was an activist, and then the Ecuadorian government arrested him and never told him to this day why he's been charged. But basically, it's such an interesting story. It's kind of a prime example, and I'll butcher the story. You should just listen to the podcast. But essentially, this guy who he was friends with Julian Assange, so there was like a slight connection there, but the government somehow decided he's going to be the case example we're going to hold up as and attribute blame for something, and but they never told him this. They have never charged him with this, all this stuff. They arrest him, and he's an innocent person, and he's still fighting the government years and years and years later, and still hasn't been told why he's arrested. Hasn't been told what his charges are. But the privacy moral of this story is that if the government had arrested him and been able to go through his computers, they would have been able to find anything they want to cherry pick and paint it. They do it all the time. For people who are politically inconvenient, they will, look through their stuff and find something. This man was a privacy activist. Everything's encrypted. He had his stuff locked down. So the government take his stuff. They think that they can put a charge on him after the fact, and they can't get access to anything. Years later, they still can't get access to anything. So it's like, you don't know whether you might be accidentally targeted by a government. You don't know whether you might be mistaken. People are mistakenly pulled over all the time at gunpoint, by police vehicles because of AI number plates that have read the number plate incorrectly, or the police database was, out of date or something like that. And so there are innocent people who are charged all the time, and you really want to be aware that your digital trail is such a liability. People can take all kinds of things out of context. And if we have the ability to just, protect our stuff, if I can interact with all my friends the same way I do now, and not have Google creating a central repository, if I end-to-end encrypt things, that's a huge liability I'm taking off the table. That's a huge amount of protection I'm adding for myself. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if it's just as easy to use an encrypted messenger as it is to use WeChat or something, okay, absolutely use the encrypted messenger. I mean, why not? But also for me, from my personal perspective, the reason why I'm into privacy, it's just because I think it's my right to decide for myself. Everyone has their own reason for privacy. Personally, it's my right to decide for myself. And when I want to give information to a company, I want to do so knowingly. And when I don't have to. I can choose other options.
There's also the narrative that we've talked about Bitcoin, but that and other currencies, it's really dark money, and it's used by criminals. And so if I get into that space, well, now I'm even more at risk, or anything else. And you probably hear that all the time. Your response?
Yeah, so I hear the same thing about both the privacy space and the crypto space. Anything that I think is problematic for a government that they're a little scared of, they will smear. And especially things you can't control, right? An individual's choice to keep things private, you can't control that. So what do? You smear it. You create this language around it that's shameful. What have you got to hide? Suddenly everyone starts parroting, what have you got to hide? As if this is some shameful thing that I should be worried about. I think it's a giant psyop. I think we've been led to believe that privacy is not this, fundamental right that we can choose to have and exercise for ourselves. We're being told to be disempowered. We're being told that privacy is dead and there's no point in doing anything. I mean, that's really convenient for all the people who want to spy on us, but it's also completely false. We have so many options. It's not dead at all. And I'm a little amused by how easy it's been to persuade people, but I'm ultimately just trying to reverse that trend. And people need to remember that they're empowered. They need to remember that they can make better choices. They absolutely have the right to, and they should exercise the rights they have.
There's this age-old tension here between security and liberty, and governments are their posture on all of this is one of security, right? And that's the narrative, but that's also the approach. But that clearly then liberty retreats in that aspect. And so do you feel and find that tension, or do you think that's actually a misnomer, that tension does not exist as much? It's more just, like you said, psyops. It's just a narrative.
It's another psyop. So when the government is talking about protecting the nation, they generally mean the nation state, not the nation's people. Otherwise, they would not mandate these KYC programs where we're all giving away vulnerable information about ourselves that they know they can't protect. Government databases are hacked all the time. They're completely insecure. That information that we hand over, that they're mandating we hand over, they're not keeping it private. They're not keeping it secure. They can't. It's very difficult to secure a system. And the fact that they're still mandating it means that they're actually not concerned for the well-being of the individuals whose lives they're putting at risk by putting all that information out there. It's the narrative we're being told, and we're being trained on this false dichotomy. Security or privacy. If you're a good citizen, then you will opt to forego your privacy to protect the nation state. No, it's all about power and control. That's what the nation state is interested in, and individuals need to remember that they are more empowered than they're being led on to believe. And so it's this surveillance era makes people so much more vulnerable. So it's completely misdirect when governments are trying to pretend that this makes us safer. I'll give you some examples. So it's just countless anecdotes where we have this era of automatic license plate readers, right? And you have companies like Flock saying, we're going to cure all crime in society in the next 10 years, whatever they're saying. And this idea that more surveillance equals less crime. So let's actually look at what's going on here. We've created cameras that are tagging every movement of every car. We're creating databases, and we're allowing government officials and police departments all over the nation to share into this. We're also bringing homeowners associations, private communities. We're having them share this database. When people opt into this Flock network, they're not just buying hardware. They're buying cloud access and access to all of the data that has been stored nationally. So number one, we've just eliminated the checks and balances of the Fourth Amendment. We've just said you have a free-for-all. And let's talk about some anecdotes we already have, which are prime examples of why we have those guardrails in the first place. So countless aspects of abuse that's happened with this, corruption that's happened. You have police departments who are using this to stalk ex-girlfriends. You're having police officers who are using this to stalk co-workers. You're having, hackers. There are similar databases that have been hacked, and suddenly your information is out there and there's nothing you can do about it. Now a stalker knows exactly what your daily patterns are. Like, this idea that this panopticon is good for society, first of all, flies in the face of examples around the world. Like, you look at the UK, they have more CCTV cameras than any other country other than China. And crime is not solved there. So what, you're saying that we're going to get to UK level surveillance and we're still not going to solve crime? What level do we need to get at before we eliminate this so-called crime? So then we have to ask ourselves, is a crime-free society even optimal? And this is kind of like a hot take, because their default is obviously, crime is bad, let's get rid of it all. But you have to ask at what cost? Because you cannot burn down a whole city to stop someone stealing a pack of gum. The cost is too high. So as a society, we're always making this trade-off of what actually is the cost here, and what is the benefit of this? So when it comes to surveillance, what we're jeopardizing is the privacy of millions, billions of innocent people are just going about their lives, and we're taking away their ability to have freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of association. We're stripping them of that. That's a huge cost. There's a reason why we have the Fourth Amendment and these guardrails, is because we decided that was the balance that we decided, that the government could get access to information, but it had to be signed off by your judicial oversight. They have to have a good reason. They have to enumerate exactly what they're looking for, where they're looking for. There were specific guardrails for a reason. And as a society, generally, we decided, yeah, that's the balance. That's as overreaching as we want, because that allows individuals to have, freedom of thought and civil rights and all of that. And it still allows the government to do their job. If there's a bad person, they can target it. They can use investigatory techniques to actually go after bad people. So it's completely crazy that we hear rhetoric from the FBI, for example, that says we're going dark, saying that we don't get access to information because people are using encryption, therefore encryption's bad. The FBI has never had access to as much information as they have right now. They have our political predisposition, our sexual predisposition, our likes, our daily habits, what books we're reading, what movies we're watching, the people we're interacting. Like, they've never had more data. So yeah, it's completely false, this idea of national security versus privacy. We decided as a society that there is a balance to how much surveillance will keep us safe and how much will keep our civil liberties safe. And we've overshot that by a long shot right now.
Folks, we're talking with Naomi Brockwell of the Ludlow Institute. You can find more of her work by going to atlasnetwork.org. And you can also learn about this topic of personal privacy in the digital age and what peers throughout the worldwide freedom movement are doing on this subject. And there you can also get involved. A $25 donation gets you a copy of Freedom's Champion magazine, but also supports the worldwide freedom movement. So let's shift to this conversation about what's happening around the world, because a lot of times this discussion on privacy and surveillance and everything shifts to just the Western-centric. But if we look at the world in whole, how are governments using technology to restrict freedom in ways that maybe most people aren't aware of?
I mean, am I allowed to talk about the country we're in? Like, I'm unsure how censored I need to be. But like, you have mercenary spyware from companies like NSO Group and Pegasus. When that was revealed to the world, it really changed the economics of targeting civilians and how much it costs governments to actually have this surveillance apparatus. What Pegasus revealed, and hats off to the team that discovered this and the team at Citizen Lab who did a lot of forensics around this, and this team at Forbidden Stories who broke the news. But we found out that this incredibly invasive surveillance software was being deployed en masse to like tens of thousands of people in like each country by governments that are quite often hostile to the people they're targeting. So we're not talking about like they're targeting the terrorists and they're targeting the people who are, child trafficking or like the horrendous people of society. No, they're targeting journalists. They're targeting NGO workers. They're targeting political opposition leaders. Governments around the world are using these surveillance tools to lock down control and push back against dissent. That's the stark reality of these surveillance apparatuses that we're seeing around the world. And Pegasus, I mean, you look at the countries that they're selling to, even the countries that they won't sell to. Like, I think UAE was famously a country they refused to sell to. And so UAE created their own. And so every country has their own kind of mercenary spyware apparatus that they can deploy en masse. I think it's important to understand how the economics shifted when stuff like this became available. Because if you look at, so a zero-day vulnerability is basically, in tech, there are countless vulnerabilities, right? The code might be buggy, there might be a hole, someone can sneak through the hole. And when you find a hole in code that no one else has seen before, it's called a 0 day. There are basically 0 days for the company to fix it. they got to get on this because this is a giant hole. Now, a 0 day, if you are like a threat actor, you will hunt for 0 days and you'll collect them. And now you have a vulnerability no one else knows about, and you're going to use that. So to purchase a 0 day for an iPhone, I think the going rate right now is like $50 million or something. It's pretty high. Yeah. And so the idea that someone could get one of these lucrative 0 days and then target someone that they need, like, this is highly lucrative for governments, but also, gangs and mafia and corporations. Like, there could be countless entities, like, corporate espionage. There could be a lot of reasons why people might want to use this. the economics changed when we got mercenary spyware providers on the scene, people providing tools like Pegasus, because they said, okay, we're not going to sell this 0 day to you. We are going to incorporate this into a chain of 0 days on a platform, and we're going to sell it as like, spyware as a service. And instead of paying us $50 million, you'll pay us $100 million, but we will deploy this to 10,000 people. We will give you access to the devices of, 100,000. Like, what tier do you want in this system? Who do you want to access? So it significantly brought down the costs for governments to surveil their own people with these incredibly invasive tools. Now, something like Pegasus is on the far end of the spectrum when it comes to like, you're a high profile person. But it's getting lower and lower to the point that when Pegasus was revealed, a lot of the people on the list of targeted suspects were the journalists, were the opposition party leaders, were the dissidents, protesters. That gets scary when we have brought down the economics so far that we're targeting ordinary people who simply want to garner more freedom in society or push back against authoritarianism. We're starting to lose the mechanisms for having that self-correcting society. So that's why proliferating privacy tools, education about all of this stuff is super important. We need to make sure that we safeguard these abilities for societies to continue to be self-correcting. We need to safeguard the people who are doing brave work to enhance freedom in their societies. And so things like Pegasus and Mercenary Spyware, they're one of many companies that exist that do this. It's super important that we remind people that privacy is not just about you. It's not about whether you have anything to hide. Privacy is also about the society you live in. Do you want to live in a society where people no longer have the ability to be private? That's a dangerous society. So it's not just about you anymore. And it's not just about like, well, I don't care about privacy. I'm going to, diminish the importance of this entire concept. No, it's about recognizing the importance of privacy and understanding that it's because of privacy. It's thanks to privacy that we can protect the most vulnerable people in society who are doing amazingly brave work to help keep us more free.
Let me ask you on this topic, this conversation, to give some advice to the peers throughout Atlas Network, right? If they're operating in a country that is adversarial, right? What's the first steps? How would you encourage them to protect themselves or maybe even their audiences? What do they need to be thinking about right now?
Oh, gosh. If you're in a hostile area, you need to do a lot more than the average person. So the average person, that I say like the top 5, just switch out your email for something privacy preserving like Proton. Switch out your messaging app for something privacy preserving like Signal. Switch out your browser for something privacy preserving like Brave. Switch out your search engine for something privacy preserving like Brave or Searx or Presearch or Startpage. You use a good VPN that's actually protecting you, not like a data harvesting shell like a lot of them are, but like Proton, Mullvad. They're kind of the low-hanging fruit. When you get to adversarial regimes, there's a lot more on the line. So you have to go a lot further. So the types of things you want to be looking at is, are you using an Android device? Well, that's going to be the least secure device of all. You probably want to try to get into something like Graphene OS, a far more privacy-enhancing phone operating system that will give you granular control over network connection, over access to your contacts, over access to camera, microphone. It's just a far more secure device for people who are dealing with dangerous situations. I would make sure that they always have backups. Like if Signal gets shut down in your country, I mean, you're probably already on Signal. If you're not, obviously move away from WhatsApp, move away from everything else. But if Signal has been banned in a lot of countries, like it was banned in Iran during the Iranian protests, and so make sure that you know the address of some Signal proxy servers. So my institute created a tutorial at the time of those bans to teach people how to create a Signal proxy server so that people in Iran could still communicate privately, despite that government putting a ban. And so if you're in a hostile regime, make sure you have the list of some proxy servers in case things like communication networks go down. You just have to start thinking about everything you're doing online. I chatted with this amazing activist from Bahrain who created this tool called Surveillance Watch. And the idea behind this tool was, we know so little about data brokers and they know so much about us. Let's create a platform where we, pull resources and headlines and any scrap of information we could find about data brokers. So we start to lift the veil on this very shadowy industry. That's a lot of government shell corporations and all of that. Anyway, you can imagine an activist in Bahrain, she's a high target. And so for her, for her, it's about understanding that and explaining her situation to her friends, because she locks down her life. She's very aware of the dangers to her if the government knows too much about her or any of that. So she basically had to have conversations with her friends where they would try to talk with her on social media platforms, and she would have to say, please stop talking to me here. I need you to talk on this private messenger. I need you to chat with you on Signal only. And they would say, I'm only talking about our lunch meeting next Friday. And they didn't understand that for her, knowing that she goes to this lunch spot is an attack vector. Knowing this person's a part of her social graph is an attack vector. Knowing this is what they, day-to-day activities suddenly become a liability for her. So I think in a lot of these regimes, maybe people have a friendship group that don't understand this. And I think a good lesson is just to remind them that they need to have strong privacy boundaries and be okay with cutting people off if they don't meet them. If it's a matter of self-protection, you need to protect your life first. And a lot of people are just not going to understand your threat model. So yeah, this Bahraini activist said that she's had to cut off a lot of friendships because of this. And it's sad, but for her, it is a safety issue.
What policy changes should Liberty advocates be prioritizing right now?
Let's get rid of the third-party doctrine. Goodness, it's the scourge of the digital age. So third-party doctrine basically is something that came about like a court precedent from prior to the digital age that basically said that, under the Fourth Amendment, you have this reasonable expectation of privacy. And the court said, well, if you give your data to a third party, you no longer have that reasonable expectation of privacy, right? If you disclosed it, it's not your information to keep anymore. And they had a bunch of reasons why they created that precedent. They were trying to catch some really bad guys at the time, as often happens. We create a bad precedent when we're, creating these, when we're targeting people and using that as an excuse for, diminishing freedoms. So this third-party doctrine came into existence, and then we hit the digital age, which runs entirely on third parties. You can't use the internet, basically, without a third party. And that means it's a government free-for-all. It means we've eliminated every check and balance on their ability to get insight into our lives and get access to our information. And so you have governments buying data from data brokers. You have governments, tapping straight into people's servers through acts like the PRISM program. And so it's just huge amounts of collection and invasiveness where the scales just shifted so far away from the individual. I think that if we want to get back to a place where we have a privacy respecting society, have those checks and balances, have those self-correcting mechanisms, have respect and dignity for individuals, we need to eliminate the third party doctrine. This idea of courts being philosophy kings and determining what's reasonable and what's not. I'm sorry, but if I have a contract with a company and I say, hey, wearable fitness app, I would give you my information, but we will sign this contract saying you will keep it private. We've signed a contract saying that they'll keep my information private. That's a reasonable expectation of privacy. In the government's eyes, it is not. If I do the same thing with my doctor and I say, doctor, we're having a confidential conversation here. I'm presuming it's confidential. This is the contract. It's reasonable for me to expect privacy in this situation. The government says it is not. So there are all of these horrible things that have come about from the third-party doctrine. We need to get away from this philosopher king idea. Let's go back to just simply redefining what a search is. That's written into the Fourth Amendment itself. So a search should be a meaningful investigation of someone. If you are doing a meaningful investigation of someone, you should need a warrant. Whether you're getting your information from a third party or not, whether that third party is voluntarily handing it over or not, you should need a warrant. And I think just reinstituting warrants in the digital age is just super important for freedom. I mean, globally, it's going to be a different conversation because Atlas Network has a global audience. So I think there are similar things where we look at the invasiveness of government to get access to all of our data. And we just need to reframe that. EU, chat control, we should not be putting a back door into everyone's private communications. ID mandates, we should not be tying our real identity to every single thing we do online. All of this stuff is a recipe for disaster and overreach. And I think that globally we need to be pushing back against this digital overreach. And we need to be reframing the conversation back to civil liberties and individual rights.
So by now, we probably have our audience on high alert. Maybe some of them are even scared at this point of lock the door. Gives you hope In the middle of all this, I don't hear out of you, and as we've interacted throughout the summit and at other times, you're not this dark, gloomy person, right? You have a bright personality, so there has to be some hope there. So what gives you hope right now?
Well, what's the name of the conference we're at right now? Radical Innovation Summit. This gives me hope because we have never had such incredible encryption technology at our disposal. We have never had decentralized digital platforms that we could use that were censorship resistant. Like, we've never had access to such incredible innovation at any point in history. And it gives me so much hope because here's the thing. I mean, Bitcoin's been banned, like 8 times in China? Why do they keep banning it? Because the bans don't work, because it's uncensorable. But it doesn't mean that they can't target individuals, right? So they could target them. So it does diminish. So it does throttle, some of this technology if they can make, case examples of people and target them. But they can't shut it down. And if people understand how to use these tools privately, well, then the world's at their feet, right? So if we have incredible innovation that empowers individuals, that gives them back control over their digital existence and over their actual lives, that's wonderful. And if the only barrier is that you have to just know how to use it privately so that you can protect yourself, so you can safeguard yourself, that's incredible reason for hope. I mean, the tables of power have already turned. It turned when we initiated the era of 3D printing. It turned when we initiated the era of blockchain technology. It turned when we started having these local AI models where we didn't have to connect to the internet. It turned when we started to figure out how to create mesh networks where we could literally connect peer-to-peer with anyone. And so all of these tools are tools where there's no central choke point that governments can target. Governments can only enforce bad authoritarian regimes through choke points. And so now we're entering an era where we're getting rid of the choke points. And that's an era that I think is going to be one of incredible blossoming, as long as we proliferate the tools that keep giving individuals access to this decentralized tech. We keep teaching people how to use the internet privately. We need to protect the people who are using this stuff. And I think as long as we can do that, I think it's going to be a really prosperous, foreseeable future.
Let me ask you about your interaction relationship with Atlas Network, participation in Atlas Network, both for you and the Ludlow Institute. How did that start and what's that been like for you?
Yeah, so Ludlow is a partner of Atlas Network, and what I love most about it is just connecting with other people. A lot of our work does deal with people in high-risk environments. Sure. It deals with activists who, outside of my own paradigm, a lot of people that I talk to, they're from a particular culture where they don't see privacy as this important thing. They don't see surveillance as the threat that they should. And so connecting with people from a completely different mindset who have been targeted by authoritarian regimes, people who have had their bank accounts frozen, who've been stopped at borders, who, have movement controlled, all of these things, connecting with them and kind of using them as the conduit through which we can help proliferate these tools globally has been amazing, because you learn ahead of time what are the risks that we should be looking for. What steps did your government take that took away all your freedom? What should we be on the lookout for? What could have protected you in those moments? If you had access to certain technology, what would have saved you in that situation? What can save you now? What resources can we give you right now to help protect you so you can continue to do important work? So really for us, it's just about getting access to people on the ground who are actually, fighting for freedom globally. And that's been an incredible experience.
Philanthropists that are considering making contribution all throughout different levels of society, when they think about the worldwide freedom movement, when they think about an organization like the Atlas Network partnering with peers throughout the worldwide freedom movement, when they think about Ludlow Institute, why is that the highest, best use of their charitable resources?
Oh gosh, because freedom is everything. Without freedom, you can't have scientific innovation. You can't have mathematical breakthroughs. You can't have, new ideas, new political thoughts that, helps make society prosper. I think that the freedom movement is everything. If we just look at the culture around the surveillance panopticon, it's not just a practical scourge. It's a psychological undoing of the fabric of society. When we self-censor, we start to become this conformist society. So this idea, if we're always feeling like we're watched, we tread on eggshells, we're a little more careful. We don't like to stand out as much. We don't like to voice our opinion as freely if we think it might be tied to us for all eternity in a permanent digital record. And that chilling effect is terrifying, right? That's when people stop pushing back against authoritarians in power because it's too scary, because everything you say to your neighbor suddenly is collected, by your ISP. And so, like, if we want freedom in a society, freedom to have new ideas, to think outside of the box, to think outside, like, think of all of the technological and scientific breakthroughs that we've had in society that required people, first of all, experimenting in private and thinking of new ideas and going against mainstream thought. Like, oh, all of the physicists say this is impossible. I'm going to work on it anyway. And we've just had such incredible innovation and human flourishing in society. We just can't have that without privacy, without the freedom to think and to make choices for ourselves. And, without the freedom movement, all of these wonderful things that enable human flourishing disappear.
I've got a couple last questions for you, and I always love to have closing conversation with my guests around a little bit more of their day-to-day. What's it like to be Naomi Brockwell? So when you're not focusing at Ludlow Institute or with peers and helping them understand privacy, what's a hobby? What are you reading? You like watching movies? What's the hobby?
I'm always doing this. And actually my day-to-day, you can think of it as being very inconvenient for those in my vicinity because of my privacy boundaries. I have pretty strict privacy boundaries. And so, I'm constantly experimenting with new tech, trying new things. Because we make a lot of tutorials for people, I like to run the gamut of most extreme privacy solution to least extreme and give people choices so that they can say, okay, well, which one fits with my threat model? And that means that I'm testing out a bunch of really extreme things. So the fact that I don't have a SIM in my phone really annoys some people who want to get hold of me. The fact that I refuse to give a phone number to people because I don't have one. And if they want to connect with me, it has to be through Signal. That bothers a lot of people. There's a lot in my daily existence that is inconvenient. If I would just, if I weren't doing this as like a full-time career, then I probably would have a SIM in my phone. Well, it depends on the phone, actually. I actually like my situation. It actually works for me. Come to think of it, I don't find it bad. I think some of the people in my life find it bad. If you're sharing an internet connection with someone and you're forcing them to update their operating system every week, like on the dot, if you are using, peer blocker NG to block DNS requests for certain websites, which makes their smart TV no longer be functional because it's all adware. Like, there are a lot of things that I kind of do. So I think that my day-to-day existence is one of difficulty for some of my friends. And I love it. I feel like I'm completely empowered in my life, making all my own choices. I feel great.
Okay, so let me reframe and maybe ask one last question here, because you're known all over the world. You have relationships all over the world, and you've traveled, and you're a speaker. Do you have a favorite place that you visited, or do you have some place that you would recommend to our audience? Hey, if you get a chance, you should go experience this.
Oh gosh, I've traveled to so many countries. Yeah, I used to MC a lot of decentralized tech conferences, so I would do like a different international trip every couple of weeks. I love the diversity of every place that I visited, the different culture, the different frame of mind, different way of seeing something, approaching a different problem. I dislike conformity. That's something I dislike. I dislike a society that converges on groupthink. So for me, travel is a great way to get a different perspective for all kinds of different issues, to get away from mainstreams that I might have fallen into. So there's no particular place. I mean, currently I'm in Mexico and I've had such a wonderful time. It's so vibrant here. The people are so friendly. I've done a little bit of like exploring and shopping, and I went to the supermarket. It's so funny when a supermarket becomes like an exotic experience. It's like, I don't speak Spanish, so I'm trying to find food that I like. I have no idea what I'm looking at. All the brands are different. Like, even that, I just find it just, the novelty is just so exciting. So I'm having a great time here. And obviously I live in the United States and I'm from Australia, and I opted to move to the United States. So obviously I love the United States. And the reason I like the United States is just the freedom movement. I think that it's probably got the largest freedom movement in the world. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I think from there, we can help other countries, like individuals inside the United States where they might have more leeway. Like, I mean, as I said, in the UK right now, there's government mandates on what websites you can access. In Australia, they've banned YouTube for people under 16. They want to mandate ID for everything you do on the internet, and they have mandated it for social media. Like all over the world, every culture is facing different strictures. And so for me, for the strictures that I'm most interested in tackling, the United States has been a good place for me to be, because I can have the freedom to create and explore these tools. And then I can create the training that can then proliferate and send out to everyone else. And if that changes, if the United States is if they start targeting me and they're like, no privacy for you, we don't like this anymore, well, I'll go to the next place. I'll find whichever the next place is where I can have the freedom to do this. And that's the wonderful thing about a decentralized world and no single global authority. We do get to choose and move around according to our values.
Well, Naomi, thank you so much for your time today and all you are doing. Wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio. This was a fascinating, thought-provoking conversation today. You can participate in more of those conversations by going to atlasnetwork.org, and while you're there, learn about all of Naomi's work and her peers at the Ludlow Institute. Join us again on Atlas Network with Michael Carnuccio.